There are moments in a woman's life when the healthiest thing she can do is not to speak, but to remain silent. The paradox is that in silence, one hears more clearly, not because the other raises his voice. He does not, but because your withdrawal creates space for the truth to reveal itself. And the most brutal thing I can honestly tell you is this: when you stop contacting a man, you do not lose him, and you let him lose himself. Many women have told me in consultations, I feel like if I don't write, everything dies. And they are right. Often what they are holding on to is not a relationship, but an emotional inertia nourished by fear, habit, or the need for affection. They take a pause, hold back, and what was meant to be a 2-day break turns into a mirror, reflecting the most uncomfortable question: what if I never write again? This is not a tactic, not a power game. It is an act of emotional dignity, and at the same time a risk. Because this silence, born from an attempt at self-preservation, may confirm the very thing you fear most: that he will not come back, that he will not look for you, that he will not even notice your absence. Here begins a cruel paradox. The man who once replied half-heartedly now does not reply at all. The one who already seemed absent simply disappears. And this pain of indifference weighs heavier than an open goodbye. For there is no break, no harsh words, no discussion to close the chapter. Only the blank page remains, and you waiting for someone to write upon it. Yet in that emptiness lies a revelation, because silence has a strange way of bringing the hidden into the light. A man does not remain in emptiness by accident. His reaction to your silence reveals more about him than any conversation ever could. And you, by resisting the temptation to break the silence first, become the witness of a truth that needs no adornment. The essential point is not how he reacts, but what you discover while you wait. Fear, anger, hope, all swirl into a vortex that tests your emotional strength. Yet, at the same time, it is an opportunity, a door to a more honest recognition of what you have truly lived. Strangely, he does not notice your absence at first as strongly as you notice his, and not because you mean nothing to him, but because the male mind, especially when the relationship has been carried, mainly by you, is trained to take the bond for granted. He does not test it daily, does not analyze it. He assumes it will hold just as one presses a switch and expects the light to turn on without thinking about the electricity behind it. For many women, not writing immediately triggers fear. The phone feels heavier, every empty notification like a small betrayal, because they have been socially, emotionally, and culturally raised to maintain connections, to preserve the bond even when it hurts. To stop writing, therefore, means not only to break contact, it means to question an identity. Who am I if I am not the one who seeks? Meanwhile, he needs time, sometimes hours, sometimes days. His attention shifts between compartments: work, friends, routines, hobbies. You who once were his emotional constant are now a silence. And human beings, no matter how rational, are addicted to repetition. When the pattern changes, the mind feels unease, a subtle dissonance, like an itch without a visible source. Then he begins to look for signs, not of love, not yet. The first impulses are mere checks, the urge to know if you are still there. Not a heroic act, not a passionate declaration, but minimal gestures, a banal message like "all good" or "saw this and thought of you." A story on social media that seems directed at you but is not confirmed. A song shared without comment. A shy knock on the door with no clear intention of entering. And here, many women fall back because these small gestures spark hope. Maybe he noticed. Maybe he misses me. But what drives him is not nostalgia. It is habit. It is ego. It is testing. He does not want to lose you completely. But he does not know if he truly wants to win you either. He only wants to know if the door is still slightly open. And you must ask yourself, am I willing to be only tested, or am I waiting to be clearly chosen? The human brain in its primal state does not distinguish between genuine affection and mere validation. But what it does recognize acutely is absence. When something that was always available suddenly disappears, the nervous system registers it as a threat, not because love has faded, but because predictability has been broken. And the mind, no matter how rational, hates uncertainty. In bonds where the woman has carried most of the gestures, the calls, the messages, the small, constant acts of care, the man grows accustomed to receiving, not always out of malice or calculation, but because emotional roles are often assumed without being named. He settles in, she persists, he reacts, she holds on, and one day she stops. That cut, quiet but powerful, echoes, not like thunder that shakes awareness, but like a muffled echo that confuses. What happened? Is she okay? Did I do something wrong? Questions that do not arise from deep love, but from the loss of a reflection. For often we love less the person themselves than what they mirror back to us. And if you were his mirror of validation, your silence leaves him alone with himself. There begins one of the most common yet least understood reactions. The man reappears not with genuine devotion, but with small hints, because his drive is not connection with you, but connection with the feeling of being desired, and that even if it may look romantic on the outside, is not an act of love but a search for narcissistic relief. I want to know if I still have you, not because I love you, but because I cannot bear that you may have stopped loving me. The problem is that many women interpret this movement as change. They believe that the minimal gesture is a renewed sign of interest, that this shy hello is the beginning of reconquest. But it is not. It is a check, a verification, like someone walking past an old house they once lived in, just to see if there is still a light in the window. He has no intention of entering. He only wants to confirm whether he would still be welcome. And you, who have already lived through disappointments, can recognize the difference. The energy with which someone knocks on your door speaks louder than their words. There are visits that want to stay, and there are knocks that only remind you they were once there. There comes a point when there is no longer room for testing. Sustained silence carries an irrevocable quality. It forces the other person to take a stand. And here, something revealing happens. When the man can no longer rely on your initiative, your daily messages, your emotional availability, he finds himself at a threshold. Some cross it with determination. Others simply turn away. But none can remain standing in the doorway forever. If he does not feel a genuine bond with you, if you were only there to fill a functional void, companionship, distraction, attention that kept him from facing his own inner emptiness, then he begins to disappear without conflict, without explanation, without goodbye. He fades like someone who leaves before being asked to stay. And as painful as that is, in truth, it saves you from a greater burden. Continuing to invest in someone who never intended to build anything lasting with you. What we often interpret as coldness is nothing but emotional flight. No harsh words, no reproaches, no dramatic ending. But even this silence speaks. It says, I am not ready to fight for this. And you deserve to hear that sentence, even if it comes in the form of absence. Yet there are, though more rarely, other men whose reaction to silence is different. They do not withdraw, but begin to reflect. Not immediately, for emotional awareness rarely arrives at the first attempt. But over time, when the stimulus is absent, when the phone remains silent, something begins to ache. And if that pain is real, it does not turn into accusations or manipulation, but into seeking. The difference is clear. No more ambiguous messages. No memes without context. Instead, there appear complete words, clear intentions, concrete gestures. Because when a man truly realizes he has been absent, he does not try to convince you of the opposite. He does not argue away your silence. He acknowledges it, and in that acknowledgement lies a maturity that only arises when the ego no longer dictates the conversation. It is not the silence that has punished him. It has confronted him with himself. It has stripped him of the protection of habit and forced him to look directly at what he nearly lost. And if he truly values you, he does more than seek you out. He shows up with words, with actions, with vulnerability. When a man disappears after your silence, the most painful part is not his absence, but the quiet confirmation that you were the only one who was truly there. For to miss what once existed is one thing, but to realize there was never anything solid to hold on to is something else entirely. Only a series of one-sided gestures you gave, hoping he would one day turn toward you. But he did not, and he still does not. Not because you lack worth, not because you do not matter as a person, but because there are men who are emotionally unavailable to anyone, not even to themselves. Their idea of connection is functional, not emotional. They are comfortable as long as they are receiving, as long as no depth is required of them. But when the scale balances, when more is demanded than sporadic presence, their answer is the coldest silence, the silence of one who does not return. And here comes the cruelest thought, the one that gnaws from within. If I had not stopped writing, he would still be here. And yes, perhaps he would. But at what price? At the cost of your emotional dignity, your constant effort, your desperate attempts to be noticed. Then you would not be in a relationship, but in a one-sided performance of love. Accepting that someone does not want to stay is one of the most intimate acts of self-love, because it means letting go of an illusion that comforted you but was never truth. It means looking in the mirror without justifying the wrong, without seeking external reasons, without telling yourself maybe it was not the right time or maybe I should have acted differently. No, sometimes the other simply does not have the emotional capacity to love the way you deserve, and that is not your fault. In such cases, silence acts like a clarifier. It does not create distance. It reveals that it was already there, and by not intervening, by resisting the temptation to save what is dissolving, you allow this revelation to free you. For even the pain of losing something real is easier to bear than the confusion of holding on to something that existed only in your hope. And if you ever ask yourself, why didn't he come back? Why didn't he fight? Remember this: whoever does not come to you when you do not call never truly intended to stay. There are men who experience your silence as a real loss, and they are not satisfied with half-hearted gestures. They do not send ambiguous lines, hidden messages in stories, or quick reactions to soothe their unrest. They simply recognize that they were absent, and they act without detours, without defense, without waiting for you to send a signal. It is not about belated romanticism or desperate strategies, but about an honest, often painful admission that they let something valuable slip away. Not because you left, but because he was not truly present while you still were. And when this awareness sets in, the silence that once seemed like a threat becomes an opportunity for healing. The difference is clear. He does not try to win you over with pretty words or explanations that sound good but mean nothing. He appears with concrete actions, with a message that does not seek sympathy but express his responsibility. I know I was far away. I do not want to lose you. With calls that do not cover over the silence but respect it. We can talk whenever you want, but I need to tell you what I feel, with proposals that are not vague promises but clear decisions. I want us to meet and truly talk. This kind of reaction is rare because it requires an emotional maturity that not everyone has developed. It does not arise from a wounded ego, but from an awareness of what is at stake. It does not seek quick reassurance. It understands that your withdrawal had a reason. Approaching you again does not mean erasing everything, but rebuilding from a different place. But even here, even with authentic gestures, you must remain clear, because not every expression of regret implies a lasting commitment. Not every impulse to return includes the capacity to stay. So ask yourself, before you respond, before the emotion of reunion carries you away, does this movement come from the fear of losing me, or from a genuine desire to be with me? There is a great difference between someone who wants you back and someone who wants to move forward with you. One soothes his fear, the other takes responsibility for a bond. And you, who have lived enough to distinguish empty gestures from true devotion, deserve this clarity. Not because you are demanding, but because you have learned, perhaps painfully, that love without emotional commitment is nothing more than a play of reflections. There is a reason why silence, when it is authentic, does not manipulate. It liberates. Not immediately, not without pain, but it does, because by interrupting the constant flow of validation, explanations, emotional caretaking, you create something psychology calls inner space. And this space is not filled with distractions, not with ready-made ideas, not with wishes disguised as certainties. It fills with what is truly there once the noise fades. In a relationship, this silence serves the function of a darkened room. At first, it is unsettling. You see nothing, but with time your eyes adjust, and you begin to recognize shapes, shades, truths you previously refused to see. He too, from his side, experiences this emotional darkness. And depending on his attachment style, secure, anxious, or avoidant, he reacts very differently. An avoidant man, for instance, may use your silence as an excuse to justify himself. She pulled away. So there was no point in continuing. But that conclusion is not rational insight. It is defense, because the relationship exposed him to an intimacy he could not handle. And before becoming vulnerable, he prefers to withdraw. Not because he feels nothing, but because he does not know how to feel safely. A man with a more secure attachment style, on the other hand, even if he was previously distracted, can use your silence as an opportunity for self-examination. He does not lock himself in his ego. He does not look for blame. He asks himself honestly, where was I while she was still there? And from that question arises a new form of contact, less impulsive, more conscious, more willing to heal without requiring you to save him. And you, on your side, also go through this process. For silence is not just a strategy of waiting, but fertile ground for your own emotional awakening. While the other reveals himself, you reveal yourself. You discover whether you miss the person or only the habit, whether what hurts is the absence of love or the end of an idealization. And it is precisely in this double clarity, his and yours, that truth begins to emerge. Not a comfortable truth, not an immediate or always hopeful one, but an emotionally mature truth. One that is not shouted or demanded, but quietly understood when two people look each other in the eye. Picture Sophie. She had been seeing Daniel for 3 months. Nothing serious, at least on the surface, but she felt something growing. Not a deep rush of love, but a form of hope. She was the one who sent messages, suggested plans, paid attention to little details. He responded yes, but with weak energy, like someone grateful without being involved. Until one day, she decided to stop. She no longer wrote, no longer pushed, no longer sought. 4 days passed. Daniel sent a dry hello without wait. She replied politely, but did not resume the old rhythm. He did not insist. The conversations cooled, dissolved, and a natural silence replaced what had been artificially sustained only by her initiative. There was no fight, no closure, only the fact remained. If she did not push, he did not move. This kind of ending, painful as it is, has a liberating harshness because there are no masks left. Daniel did not disappear out of punishment. He had simply never had deeper intentions. He was not cruel, not malicious, only available for the superficial. And by removing the constant pressure, Sophie was able to see this without confrontation. The bond, since it was not mutual, dissolved on its own. Now, picture Lena, a woman in another stage of life. She had been with Ryan for almost a year. He was not indifferent, but lately distant, too wrapped up in himself, scarcely present. She felt lonely even at his side. So she made a decision. 1 week of silence, not as punishment, but as a pause to hear her own pain without noise. On the 3rd day, Ryan began to seek her, not with empty messages. He called, left a voice message saying he had been reflecting. He did not sound desperate, but sincere. On the 5th day, he showed up not with excuses, but with flowers and eyes that did not avoid hers. He said, I know I have pulled away. I didn't realize it, but I am here. If you want to talk, I want to listen. No guarantees, no eternal promises, but something felt different. The intention to repair, not out of fear of losing her, but from the admission that her absence had confronted him with a void he could no longer ignore. These two scenarios are neither good nor bad. It is not about condemning Daniel or idealizing Ryan. It is about showing what happens when silence does its work. For it does not always bring the other back, but it always shows clearly who is who in the story. Accepting the other's response, whatever it is, requires a quiet kind of courage. Not pride, not forced indifference, but the courage of a heart that recognizes its limit without losing its sensitivity. Because whether he disappears or honestly returns, you must carry one truth. You have no control over what he feels, but you do have control over what you are willing to carry. If his answer is final silence, then your task is not to see it as a judgment on yourself. It does not reflect your worth. nor your capacity to love. It is a mirror of his own emotional limitation. He did not come back because he did not want to, could not, or did not know how. And in any of those cases, what remains for you is not guilt, but closure. A closure does not always come with words. It takes shape when you decide not to keep insisting on something that was never truly offered to you. That is hard, of course, because when there is no farewell, the mind invents scenarios to find logic where there is only emptiness. But love does not have to justify what never was. It only asks that you allow yourself to stop waiting for something that has already defined itself through its absence, not as resignation, but as emotional liberation. If his response, however, was sincere, if he returned with intention, with actions, with vulnerability, then the task is different. Not to blindly jump back into the relationship, not to idealize his return as though it were some epic proof of love, but to observe, to feel, to see whether his actions sustain what his words imply, not as punishment, but as respect for yourself. Because even the man who comes back can fail, not because he does not love you, but because he has not yet done the inner work needed to truly stay. And you are not here to repeat cycles. You are here to build from another place. A place where silence is no longer a threat, but a tool where you no longer fear what happens if you stop being the one to write first. Because you know the one who wants to stay will find a way. And the one who does not will find an excuse. No matter what his response is, the real question is, how do you respond to this truth? Do you deny yourself because you were not reciprocated? Do you betray yourself out of fear of losing him again? Or do you hold on, not harshly, but with clarity to what you now know you deserve? Silence does not mean disappearing. Silence does not mean punishing. Silence, when it comes from a soul tired of pushing, is a return to yourself. It means stopping the knocking on doors that will not open. It means letting go of the rope, not because you do not care, but because it is too painful to keep holding it alone. You have lived enough to know not everything that begins with hope ends in reciprocity. And that does not make you naive. It makes you human. Because love, when it springs from the true desire for togetherness, is not a strategy. It is an act of devotion. But devotion without response over time becomes exhaustion. And sometimes, in order to find yourself again, you must stop searching for the other, precisely in the silence you once feared. You have discovered a truth that does not shout, but weighs heavily. The one who wants to stays. Not when you call him, not when you insist. He stays because he feels it, because he chooses it, because he is ready. And if that does not happen, you are not obliged to become the emotional beggar for what never arrives. For love is not blind. It is clear. It sees what the other does not give. It sees what hurts. It sees what does not change. And even if it hurts, it learns. It learns to let go without drama. It learns to recognize the value of absence as a tool of truth. It learns not to return at the first small sign of attention because you have understood that not every message is a bridge. Sometimes it is only a road sign. It shows you where you stand, but it takes you nowhere. This path you have walked is not a formula. There are no guarantees, no manuals. But there is one certainty. You have survived worse than this silence. And if you are here today finally listening to yourself, it is because a part of you has grown tired of pressing where no echo comes back. And in that weariness lies wisdom. Perhaps you still do not know what to do. Perhaps you are still waiting for an answer that does not come. Perhaps you are still interpreting ambiguous gestures. That is all right. No one heals in haste. But one thing you can promise yourself from this day forward, you will no longer lose yourself just to avoid losing someone else. For true love is not measured by how much you insist, but by how you hold yourself when no answer comes. And in that holding, even when everything in you trembles, there lies a dignity no one can ever take away from more.